The views expressed on this program are not those of IntellectualRadio.com, its subsidiaries, or sponsors. Encouraging, educating, and empowering you into action. This is Warriors Talk with your host, Lady ReShell.
Hello. Welcome to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we move away from awareness towards action. It is Testimonial Monday, and I'm grateful that you have joined us. We are live on Intellectual Radio. We just heard from Roman with the Drive at 5. Keep it locked right here on Intellectual Radio and allow us to feed your brain. The show is being sponsored by Emanuel Church of God in Christ, located at 3058 West Van Buren in Chicago, with my pastor, Michael Richardson. And we are still practicing social distancing, so you can catch him every Sunday morning at 10:15 on our Facebook page, Emanuel Cogic. Prayers is going out to John Travolta's wife, Kelly Preston, who passed away last night from breast cancer. He said she had a 2-year battle, and last night she was 57 years old. So prayers go out to him and his family. Our daily quote for today is, "Victory is always possible for the person who refuses to stop fighting." So I have a very special guest today, and I'm excited about the information that she is going to bless us with today. She is a cancer survivor, advocate, and the founder of My Breast Years Ahead, and the co-founder of My Styles Matter. We have none other than Tiah Tomlin. Hello, Tiah.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Oh, not a problem. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and to share this information with us. I really want to just dive right into it, because I know it's going to be a lot of information that you're going to give us today. We know that you are a breast cancer survivor, triple negative, same breast cancer that I had. And we know that that is an aggressive form of breast cancer. And we know that breast cancer is affecting Black women. It is really taking a toll on us, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I just want to have you to introduce yourself and just tell us something that we should know about Tiah Tomlin.
Sure. So I'm Tiah Tomlin. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Was diagnosed in 2015 with triple negative breast cancer, stage 2A. Went through all of my treatments. And, as I was going through my journey, I started to reach out to others, because there was so much I wanted to know about this journey, and I didn't have answers. The doctors would say certain things to me, but they didn't tell me everything. So I started to research. I researched as much as I could, and I took an integrative approach to my healing. Coupled with that, my company was laying off at the time, and I couldn't talk a lot about my journey and put it out there because, I didn't want to lose my job. And so what I did is I went to support groups. But when I went to support groups, nobody looked like me. It was older white women. And so I made the decision. When I first got diagnosed, I said, God, I'm going to help as many people as I can. You see me through this, I'm going to help as many people as I can. And when I went to that support group, or those support groups, because I went to a few of them and not seeing anybody that looked like me, I said, this is a problem. I know that we're in the infusion center, but, where is the connection? Where's the support? Why aren't we here? And so I started My Breast Years Ahead. It's a support community, a sisterhood, where we just rally around each other. So that was one thing that I did, because I knew that I wanted to, help other people. I wanted to take the things that I learned through my research and share that information back with other people about healthy lifestyles, about things that can lower their risk from being diagnosed with this disease. I was diagnosed. I didn't have a genetic mutation. And my brother also was diagnosed with testicular cancer, stage 4. And so, with all the things that I learned, I wanted to help others. And so I started a nonprofit, or co-founded a nonprofit called My Style Matters.
So you've been busy.
Yeah.
You've been busy.
Yeah.
but I think we need it because, like you said, when you were going to those groups, people didn't look like you. And I'm just wondering, were the African American women shy to share their stories? Because a lot of times we really don't want people to know what's going on with us because they'll make us seem like we're weak, and they'll start treating us a certain way. So, we tend to not say anything and just try to make things seem like it's normal when we know that it's not.
Yeah, I think part of the problem, one, we don't like to talk about it, right? Because we're taught to be strong and be a boss and all of these things that we talk about in our culture. But I think the other part of that too, living in Atlanta, if anybody knows, traffic here is horrible. And so I think with the support groups, a lot of it was during the day. And so, people were still working. A lot of us, we can't afford to take a leave from our jobs to go through this treatment because financially we can't afford it, and some of us don't have the privilege of having, that corporate job that pays six figures, that have all the great benefits. Some of us are working part-time jobs at 2 and 3 different places. And so we can't afford to do that. So, and we have families that we have to take care of and just our life in general. And so going to those support groups just wasn't always an option. Even one that I became a part of later, we did things in the evenings and we tried to do it in a central location to make it convenient, but just between the commute, the travel, and all the other factors that are, I would call barriers, it just wasn't an option. And so I said, well, being that there's a gap, I see the gap, I see the need, how can I make this work? Because we still need to connect with each other. So I started the group online. I was a part of a lot of online groups, but it wasn't anything for Black women, and it wasn't anything for women in my backyard, because I just didn't want to be a part of another group where, we love up on each other through social media, but when I need that personal touch, I can't get it because you're across the pond or you're in another state. So I wanted to create something for women in our backyards for us to love up on each other and connect. So, yeah.
I believe, because when I was going through, I was still working full time. And when I got off work, had to go home and take care of the kids. You still had after school activities. So it's like, where do I fit the support group in? Where do I find time, for my healing and to get people to, help pour into me so that I can get past this. And, online is removing one of those barriers so that, I can sit at home and do it. I could be in my car on my way home from work. There's so many ways that you can listen online, and it won't be like an interruption to your day. But you'll still get what you need.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up that point, because it says to me, and it shows me and many others, that as Black women, as mothers, as daughters, we're like the pillars of our family. So when it comes to self-care, even in the midst of us fighting a disease, we're not putting ourselves first.
That's true, because we wait. We want everybody else. I mean, that's just part of our nature, but we're not going to be able to take care of everybody else if we're not taking care of ourselves first. So, and women learn that when you're going through cancer, sometimes you're not going to be able to do everything. You have to bring in other people to help you. And, there's no shame in it. It's just all a part of you getting to your new normal. Yeah, and whatever that looks like for you, because we know that it's different for everybody. So just learn to accept that and learn to accept help.
Yeah. Yes, most definitely.
So I want to talk about the African Americans, just not just only women, but African American period, because we know that for some reason it seems like all of the diseases that are out there, it seems like we have a higher rate, higher death rate, should I say. It's not that we are being diagnosed more. It's just when we do get it, it's probably diagnosed in the later stages. We miss appointments, or we don't have access to good health care. Mm-hmm. And we end up dying. Our mortality rate is higher than that of Caucasians or maybe even Hispanics. So let's just talk about it, because
when we look at Black women, or the Black community, right? So I mean, COVID is really showing us all the issues that we have within our community when it comes to our health. We have the comorbidities. We are leading in practically every health area or disease state that there is. So whether it's a heart disease, diabetes, we're leading, and it's sad, even down to cancer. So when you think about cancer, statistics say that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with this disease. Well, when you think about Black women, we get diagnosed at a higher rate. We are 3 times more likely, especially if you're under like the age of 35, we're like 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer. We're 2 times more likely to die from this disease. So you think about you and your girlfriend, every 1 in 8, if you were to count that, 1 in 8 of your girlfriends will be diagnosed with this disease. And then if it's several of you all, then think about what's the risk of you dying. Black women have a 42% higher rate of mortality rate of dying from this disease. We're 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So we ask the question, why is this the case for us? And not just in the space of breast cancer, but even down to like prostate cancer, multiple myeloma, colon cancer. A lot of us are leading, and it's not always because there's a genetic mutation. Now, granted, they're starting to look more at genetics to see what's going on and what's causing it, but we also have to look at things like the environmental factors. I think about our community and access. We don't have access to a lot. There's food deserts. A lot of times people will think, well, there's more food deserts in not the rural, in more rural communities. No, you have food deserts right in the inner city. If there is not if there's not access to any kind of food within 1 mile of where you live, that's considered a food desert. So we take that. All right. So now let's say they do have the food in their communities. Well, what kind of food do you have in your communities, right? I think about in the urban areas, what do you see on the corners? You see nail salons. You see
liquor stores,
beauty supply stores. You see liquor stores. You see all the fried foods. You don't see healthy options. And then if you go into like the grocery stores, let's say a Kroger or a Publix or what have you, that's in your area, a lot of times the organic foods that they do have, the produce, is going bad. It doesn't even look good. So when we talk about just overall having access to help us be preventative or lowering our risk, we don't have that option. Then you tack on the stress levels that we have in our communities. I mean, again, going back to COVID, a typical example, a lot of people were able to work from home. But when you go into those stores, for example, I went into Whole Foods and I started looking around at Whole Foods and I was like, okay, this is in the middle of the pandemic. Who's actually here? It's us at Whole Foods doing Instacart and all of these other things. It was us. We can't stop working. We can't afford to stop working. We are the ones that's on the front line. And so when you start thinking about that, these are stressors that impact us, the financial barriers that impact us. And so now we start to question, why are we leading in a lot of these disease states? We don't have access to healthcare. We can't go get screenings. We don't have access to healthcare. We're not checking ourselves just from a prevention standpoint, not even a screening, just even in your overall, every single year you do your annual fitness. Not fitness, your physical. We're not even doing that. So when we wonder why are these things happening, and it's so much more. Of course, there's the mistrust in the healthcare community that's causing these problems. But, I think about, like I said, going back to the beauty salons, when you look at makeup, you go on Instagram and Facebook and you see we are snatched to the boards, as they would say, face all beat and everything. We look beautiful and look great. But do we know what's in those products that we're using? A lot of those products have either come from China. A lot of the raw materials have come from China, and they are carcinogens. And so now we are putting this on our face on a daily basis. We're putting it on our skin. I mean, I'm guilty of it from the standpoint of before I was diagnosed. If there was a product and it smelled good, guess who bought it? Me. We are 22.5% more likely to buy a product based on fragrance. If it has fragrance in it, we're going to buy it. So when Bath and Body Works will have their sales or, other stores will have their sales, I will go and purchase all that I could. not really thinking about breast cancer. Most of us don't think about breast cancer, or any type of other health ailment. But after learning the things that I learned, and I knew better because I was a chemist and I worked in the pharma industry. But when you start looking at all the chemicals that you're using on a daily basis and you're not doing anything to detox your system, you're not eating clean, you're constantly putting on makeup, you're constantly buying all these hair products, you have all these plugins in your house, your environment, you're not getting fresh air, you're not getting vitamin D. I mean, all of these things are compounded. And yes, the FDA does make allowances for us to have trace amounts of toxicities in our products. But when you start to add that up, now you have a toxic situation in our bodies. And so one of the things that, when I think about why are these things happening, we're not getting educated about this. We're really not. I mean, we're not talking about this in our homes. We're not sharing this information with our families. When somebody does get diagnosed, we sweep it under the rug. And we've got to stop that. We've got to break these barriers down if we really want to, we say Black Lives Matter. Well, it matters in this case too. We got to start having the conversation in our homes. We got to start teaching our young daughters how to do self-breast exams. I mean, I don't know, if you've experienced anything, but growing up, did they talk about those things in your family? No. We've got to change the culture. And it starts with us who have been diagnosed with this disease to start sharing our experiences, start sharing the journey, start advocating, start changing policy, start educating young girls about breast health. I found my lump. And had it not been for my 7th grade teacher teaching me how, talking to us about doing self-breast exams, not necessarily, teaching, because I had to learn more and more along the way, but having that discussion with us in middle school about our breasts and doing self-breast exams, I don't know where I would be. I may not be here today to have this conversation.
I think it is important. It is important for us to break the cultural habits that we have right now, because they're really not working for us. It's doing more harm than good. I started talking to my girls about their breast cancer. I have 4 of them. So I started talking to them once I was diagnosed. Like before that, I never said anything to them. I mean, they're little, but I never really mentioned anything to them. And when my sister passed away in 2010 from breast cancer, nobody in my family was like, is this, hereditary? Should we be worried? Should I go get a mammogram? It was just like, oh, that's an isolated incident. That's her. Right. Nobody really discussed it. And then, then I was diagnosed 3 years later, and I'm like, maybe had I maybe raised the conversation, or maybe even went to the doctor, I probably would have caught mine a lot earlier, because we know cancer just don't start overnight. It doesn't pop up overnight, but I probably would have found it earlier and maybe have more options to do, less treatment. So I think it is important for us to start talking, start opening our mouths, and, stop trying to hide these secrets because so-and-so was sick. You can save somebody's life just by, saying, hey, so-and-so had cancer. Go to the doctor and tell the doctor, what should I be doing about this? This is my family history. And you can save lives.
And I think the other thing, one of the girls in our sisterhood posted today, we had a conversation about it the other day, but she said, I feel like breast cancer has become so commercialized. We've made it so pretty that people aren't really seeing the seriousness of it. Even when you look at some of the commercials, and I know part of that is, rules and regulations, why they can't show certain things. But, when you look at some of the commercials, you don't see what we really go through. Yes, we try to fight. We try to make ourselves look good and all of those things because we just want to feel good. When you look good, you feel good, right? But if we're not really showing the realness of this disease, then people are not going to take it as serious. If we're just patty caking it and putting Band-Aids on it and, fluff pink and let's celebrate and all of this stuff, which I think those things are important. I'm not taking away from it. But at the same time, we got to have some kind of balance so that people can really start taking it more serious.
I totally agree.
It's taking our lives.
It really is. And I often ask people, like, what do you do once you buy that pink item? What do you do after that? Do you just throw it in your car, put it in your purse? What's the education behind you buying, oh, I donated to a cause. Are you sure that you really donated to a cause? You sure that that money is going towards a cause? And I always try to encourage people to donate to, organizations that you know about, just right in your hood, in your backyard. Donate to those organizations, because they're going to make sure that the money gets to the people who really need it. Because when you're fighting breast cancer, like you said, some people, they may not go to work. They may have to start working. They may have to start working part-time. And it may be that they have a little money to where they can't even buy the healthy food that they need. So they may just buy something that's cheap and quick, because that's what their money can afford. So I think the education portion is very much needed, because it will save our lives. They say knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is really power. What are you doing with that knowledge once you get it? What are you doing with it? And then are you sharing it with other people? You should not have a cancer diagnosis and then shut your mouth. You should not. You should be telling somebody about that cancer diagnosis, even if it's just a one-on-one basis. Somebody should know about your healing. You should be telling somebody so that you can help save somebody else's life.
And the other part of that too is, even if you go as a supporter to a breast cancer awareness event, one of the things I see that a lot of people do is they have these awareness events, but there's no awareness, right? It's a fun party, turn up, let's drink, so forth and so on, hookah, whatever. But I'm like, where is the awareness? If you're raising awareness, then raise awareness, right? Help to educate people. And then the other part is, when you go to these events or when you participate in something around awareness, what actions are you taking for yourself to be preventative? So whether you've never been diagnosed with this disease, whether you've been diagnosed with this disease and I don't like to use the word remission, I like to say healed, whether you're healed from cancer, whether you're, going through the journey, whether you're stage 4, like, what are you doing to take action to help lower your risk of either a recurrence from being diagnosed, having a recurrence, having a poor quality of life, or preventing this thing from metastasizing, taking some of that information and trying to do the best that you can to make those changes, and that's what we try to do at My Sound Matters, my nonprofit. We try to educate people on making some of these lifestyle changes. Now, I can't say we're going to solve world hunger as much as I would love to, but if I can just plant a seed, I hope that you would research and do something with it. I don't want to just share the information with you and say, oh, thank you, and you do nothing with it. I fight every day and do the work that I do so that you don't have to hear those words, it's cancer. You don't have to go through that journey, or the doctor say to you, there's no more that we can do. I really want to see our people flourish, not just Black people, anybody, but in particular, Black people, because we don't have the same advantage that non-Blacks do have, and so how can I continuously impart things into them? So by being on your show, like, for example, for today, there are things that I want to be able to share with your audience. Like, there's an app called Think Dirty. And with that app, you can actually go into your home. You can scan the barcodes of all the products in your home, and it will tell you the level of toxins in your home. You can scan the barcodes of all the products in your home, and it will tell you the level of toxins or how dirty that product is. And then it will also share with you products that you can get to replace it. So that's good. Replace it, meaning something that's clean, that doesn't have all those toxins in it. So a lot of times I use that app. I'll go to Target and I'm scanning stuff, and people are looking at me like, what is she doing? You don't work here. And I'm like, no, I don't work here. And that's an opportunity for me to educate them about the app, and I show it to them. And a lot of times I'll see them put whatever product they were buying, they put it back on the shelf, and they'll pick up something clean. Now, some of those things may cost a little bit more, but I'd rather spend the money up front than have to spend it on the back end on my health when there's a problem. The other thing I hear people say is, hey, girl, look, we all gonna die from something. I'm gonna live my life and enjoy my life. Yes, you're absolutely right. There's 2 things that's guaranteed in life. Well, 3 things that's guaranteed in life. That's 1, to be born, 2, to pay taxes, and 3, to die. But my question to them is, well, do you want to die suffering? Do you want to suffer? You know, a lot of us cancer survivors, we have suffered the side effects of going through this, the mental anguish that we have to deal with, not only going through treatment, but even post-treatment. Every day, you know, if we experience some kind of pain or ache or whatever, in our minds, we think, is that the cancer coming back? So again, it's so important for people to get this knowledge, to understand not just the statistics, but understand that this tremendously impacts us as a Black community way more than our white counterparts, way more than other ethnicities. So we've got to start making those changes. I think about some of the things that they're looking to do, and I was having a conversation with a friend early about this, where they're looking to, you know, get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Well, then why don't we do what we can to be preventative so we don't have to depend on that? You know, or if we're being treated horribly in the hospitals, you know, I'm not going to say horribly, but if we're experiencing this disparity that we're seeing in the hospital setting or healthcare setting, then why are we doing the things to be preventative of us having to experience those types of things?
That's why I always push taking action. Like, you know, don't wait for a diagnosis. You do something now. Once you get the diagnosis, then it's too late. Now you got to work on, you know, your healing. But you have the powers in your hand right now to work on how to prevent or to lower your risk of getting a cancer diagnosis. So do all of those things. Like you said, educate yourself. And I think some people are scared to, you know, because when you hear cancer, the first thing they think about is death. So, you know, they don't want to go into educating themselves and looking to see, okay, yeah, you know, if I change my diet, that could lower my risk. If I lose weight, that could lower my risk. If I exercise, that could lower my risk. You know, getting all of my family history and just knowing what runs in my family. Did they survive? What type of treatment did they get? You know, like all of these things that you can use. We have the tools. We just, I don't know, we just being lazy about it.
Yeah, we don't apply them. And I think it's important for us to start. You got to start when they're young. You got to start. We need to do advocacy work. Start bringing these things into the school. You know, My Style Matters just launched their Breast Health Matters program. And this is for young girls, young girls and adult women. But our goal is to educate our community. So not only are we educating them about breast health, we're bringing light to how to do your self-breast exams, or what they call it, self-breast awareness now, because they don't like to use exams. You know, we talk about the screenings, but we also talk about, you know, the prevention side, right? You know, and not only are we talking about the prevention side, we also do a component where we take action and we teach them how to make personal care products with things that's in your home that doesn't have the toxicities in it. So not only are you saving money, you know, you're also doing things that could potentially save your life. You know, and it's planting the seed. You know, one little thing that we do is not going to do everything, but it triggers thoughts. It triggers, okay, well, what else can I do? And what else can I do? And the more you start looking, the more information that you will begin to see that will help you. Kind of going back to what I was talking about in the food deserts in our communities, we don't have, you know, you don't see a lot of healthy options in our communities. You don't see like a Whole Foods or Sprouts in our communities, or Trader Joe's in our community, or, you know, juice bars and all of that stuff in our community. A lot of the stuff from a food standpoint is not good for us. And we are the largest consumer. So, you know, we've got to find ways to bring the right things to our communities. And it has to start with the education. And we have to create the education in a way that it's fun and it's engaging. Sometimes, the education can be a little bit boring, but I think if we find ways to make it fun and engaging, then people will be more likely to change their behaviors.
And then let them know that it's not going to be an overnight process. You know, it's a lifestyle. I try to get away from saying diet and say, you know, make it a part of your lifestyle. And when you do that, you know, you tend to keep that type of habit versus, you know, you doing it really fast 7 days and then, okay, you're not doing it anymore. You're back to the same habits. So, I try to take my girls with me when I go and do any type of advocacy work, or when I have events, they're right there with me. And so they're learning and they're picking up little nuggets, even like with the food, because I decided to become vegan. So my 8-year-old, she'll say, "Ma, is this food good? What is in this food? Should I eat this? Should I eat that? Is this healthy?" So like right now, she's programming her mind to try to look at the labels to see what's good for her to eat and what's not. And it does start at this age, because we have a lot of kids who are obese at this age. And why?
Yep.
Where are they getting the food from? They're not going to the stores themselves to buy it. So as parents, it is our job to, try to set the tone right now, so they can have those habits once they do get up in age. They already have those habits. And at the same time, lowering their risk of a lot of these diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talked about labels. That's one of the things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be rolling out a class to teach people how to read labels. And even down to children. A lot of kids, they like the Takis and all of that stuff. And a lot of stuff that they eat has a lot of coloring in it. But I think if you start to educate the kids, and like I said, and you're doing it in a fun way, sometimes when you educate the kids, they can also encourage and influence their parents. And then when we start talking about, kids are so resilient, they're so smart, they have the YouTube and all of that stuff. And so if you just go on a YouTube channel and you say, "Hey, look, let's pull down a recipe and let's do it together. Get in the kitchen, get a blender, teach them about smoothies and make it colorful, make it a science project." I mean, when you start doing that in your homes, you start to actually, impart that information into the children. But again, if you're a mentor, you may be working with kids that aren't privileged. As a mentor, these are things that you can do. Don't just talk about, sports or, I don't know, whatever they talk about. You talk to kids about these days,
TikTok.
Doing dances and TikToking and all of that stuff. Start looking at what are the things that you can impart into these children at a young age, so they can start thinking. And even if their parents don't cultivate that, they're always going to remember what their mentor did back when. And they may start looking at how can they make changes with their own lives as well.
Yeah, I believe it starts with the parents. You mentioned making like your home products. Like when we was going to the store when the pandemic first started, there was no hand sanitizer in the store. So I looked up online like how to make your own hand sanitizer. All we needed was an aloe vera gel and some alcohol, and we just made it, and that was it. It was just that simple, and they was excited doing that. So you do have to make it fun for them, and when it's fun like that, they'll have a tendency to remember it. And then they'll come to you and say, "Okay, what else can we try? Let's try something different." And they'll be looking up stuff for you to do. So, we have to draw them in early so that, when they do get up in age, they can pass it on, influence their friends as well, and pass it on to other people and as well as their children.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
If you are just tuning in, this is Warriors Talk. I'm talking to Tiah Tomlin, and we're talking about being healthy before a breast cancer diagnosis. Don't wait until you get a breast cancer diagnosis, but you have the power right now in your hands to be healthy and to get all of the education you need. Don't be afraid to go on the internet and don't go crazy. Because I remember when I first got diagnosed, my doctor was like, "Stay off the internet, stay off the internet." I was like, but it said that she was like, "Get off the internet." Okay.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to go crazy on the internet, but, look up information on the internet just to see what's going on, to educate yourself for the different treatments that they have coming out. Things have evolved a lot when it comes to breast cancer treatment, a treatment period for cancer. But, we're not going to know. We're going to think, "Oh, I have this diagnosis and, I'm going to die."
Yeah.
So educate yourself and give yourself a peace of mind. And we are live right here on Intellectual Radio, you guys. And I'm very passionate about the cancer subject because I don't want anybody else to get a cancer diagnosis. I don't want anybody to suffer through having to do chemo, having to be cut on radiation, none of that. And as Tiah mentioned, even having that mental portion once you're done with treatment, having to go through that. But at least we have support groups that will be able to be there for you. So you don't have to be alone going through a cancer diagnosis. You stop going through it alone. Stop hiding, being by yourself, thinking that, nobody is out there for you. A cancer diagnosis is not, you haven't did anything wrong. So don't be shamed that you have it. But start, you still have the power to take action, even after a cancer diagnosis. And African American women, we wait sometimes so late to get in there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we don't follow up because why? We scared to hear what that doctor is going to say. They already know they're going to tell me I have cancer, so I ain't going back. So meantime, that cancer is multiplying. It's not going to stop multiplying because you're not going back.
Yeah.
So,
and it's so,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's so important that, even if you have been diagnosed, is to connect with other survivors. Even if you said, you know what, I don't want to hear anymore, connect with other survivors, because there's so much that we don't know from our doctors, because they don't know everything, right? And from one doctor to another, treatment may vary. There may be, different scenarios and how you're being handled. But I think it's so important that if we connect with one another, we can just share information. We can give each other hope. If nothing else, we're there to even give each other hope. And it's something that our friends and families really can't. Our friends and families really can't do. They can encourage us, but if they've never walked in our shoes, they really don't understand. Even post-treatment, they really don't understand. So it's so important. And I hear all the time women say to me, I wish I would have known about your group when I was first diagnosed. I wish I would have known about, I wish I would have connected with other people before I was diagnosed. Or, when I was going through the journey, I wish. And so it's so important. I can't stress it enough. Connect with other survivors, because we really can help each other. So even if you're feeling like, I can't do this, I don't want to go through this, let us be your hope. Let us, help you and lift you up, because really the battle starts in the mind, or the victory. I'd rather say the victory starts in the mind, and it's really having faith and trusting God. That God has got you no matter what. I know that sometimes our faith can be a little rocky. We can believe God for one thing, but struggle to believe him for another, and I was guilty of that. But going through this journey, when I had to take a step back, I never forget, after I got that phone call, I was sitting in the bathroom, and when that phone call came through, I was just crying and crying. I had a friend that was living with me, and I didn't want them to hear that, what I was going through. So I went to my bathroom, and I'm just sitting there sobbing. And I can remember this like it was clear as day that God spoke to me and said, get up and take your bed. He said, you can sit there and wallow in it, or you can get up and fight. You saw what I did for your father. You saw what I did for your brother. Why can't I do the same for you? And I got up, and I'm still sobbing. I went to the foot of my bed and wrote in my mirror. I said, my faith is my healing power. And in that moment, I surrendered, and I said, God, have your way. Whatever this is, even if this is unto my demise, have your way. But I'm going to trust you with my whole heart that you got me. Not to say that I'm not going to have moments of frustration, because I did. I had a moment where I said, I'm done. I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. And it wasn't that I was done with life. I was done being sick, fighting to get up to feel better. But, I had to pick myself up by the bootstraps and say, okay, get it together. It was kind of like, what would your mother say? Kind of grab you by your chest and you better get it together. And I had those moments because I had to encourage myself. There was nothing that my mother could do. There was nothing a doctor could do. There was nothing my father could do, a boyfriend could do. This was a walk and a journey between me and God. So I had to trust him and rest in him, knowing that he's got me. I always say, I didn't beat cancer. I just showed up and God did the rest. Because I can't be that selfish to say something that I did when I know I depended on him and that's what he did. But, I tell survivors, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't just say, I don't want anybody to know. I don't want to talk to anybody, because you miss out on an opportunity to get the help that you need, to get the encouragement that you need, to get the strength that you need. When you can't lift your arms up, in our sisterhood, we got over 500 women that will be your arms, that will, lift you up when you're too weak to lift them up. So if there's anybody who's listening, you're going through and you're struggling with this, please connect with somebody who's gone through this, because, we can help to prevent you having a poor quality of life or you having an early death, right? At a young age. Yes, we know that God's going to, when God is ready to take us home, he's going to do it. But at the same time, God is also giving us tools that we don't use, like our tongue. What the word says, there's life and death is in the power of the tongue.
Yes,
so if you can't speak, then we can speak for you. We can impart those things for you and lift you up, So definitely connect. And don't just give up, with ladies and men, men too, because men don't like to talk about it. Men really are quiet about it.
So they really need the support groups. I can remember getting my diagnosis and seeking out people who had survived. Like, I would seek out, if I knew you survived cancer, I was looking for you and I wanted to know what happened. What did you do? Why did you choose that route? I just wanted to hear from somebody who's been through it, and who's on that could give me hope. So that hope is really important when you're going through, because sometimes you don't have anything else. You have nothing else. But if you have that hope, so it's important to seek out other people. Can you give the information again, Tiah, for your group, so in case somebody is listening, they want to join?
Yeah, so they can contact us. We're on Facebook. My Style Matters is the name of our nonprofit organization. We're on Facebook, My Style Matters. We're on Instagram at My Style Matters. And we're also on Twitter, My Style Matters too. So that's MYSTYLEMATTERS.
So Tiah, what would you say? And I think you probably already told me, when you were in the bathroom and you got your diagnosis, was that your defining moment in your cancer journey?
Absolutely. I knew in that moment, after I heard from the Lord and I walked, went into my bedroom, I knew this was about purpose. Because then at first, before I walked to the bathroom, you have, why me? The doctors, she said carcinoma, and that was it. That's all that I heard. It's carcinoma, and that was it. I didn't hear anything else. In that split second, everything was running through my head. Why me? I'm not married. I don't have kids. I'm going to lose my breast. Who's going to want me? What about my job? What about my parents? Like, all of these things were running through my head. But when I had that moment in the bathroom and I cried, and when God just reminded me, my dad had a stroke in 2011, and my brother was diagnosed that same year, just a few weeks after my dad was diagnosed with my dad had a stroke. My dad had a stroke in the center of his brain. They don't know why my father is still living. And my father was able to walk, and my father's still able to talk. The doctors were saying, you're a miracle practically. My brother, stage 4 testicular cancer. So God reminded me, and my brother's doing great. They had given my brother 6 months to live. And that was 2011. He was 32 years old he had 3 young kids at the time. And God just reminded me of, wait, where's your faith? You saw what I did for your father. You saw what I did for your brother. Why can't I do the same for you? And what it taught me was watching my father go through what he went through. When my dad was in the hospital after he had his stroke, my dad was praising the Lord. He was crying, because that's kind of one of the things that the stroke does. But to watch my dad praise God anyhow, to watch my brother not give up on God, that taught me how to fight. And so I knew that there was purpose in my journey, that this was not just about me. Yes, it helped to level up my faith, but this wasn't just about me. And, you kind of question, well, why me, God? What is it that you saw in me? Because I didn't think that I was strong. Honestly, if you would have told me way before I was diagnosed with breast cancer that I would be diagnosed with breast cancer, I think I probably would have passed out or died just because of the fact knowing that I would be diagnosed with this disease. But he had given me such a strength, and I understood that it was about my purpose. Because prior to my diagnosis, I'll be honest, in 2014, I was struggling. This was probably around like August. I went to visit my cousin and his wife. They're about 2 years older than me. Both of them are VPs, doing exceptionally well. They have 2 girls. They're very involved and engaged in their kids' lives, and they're VPs of Fortune 500 companies. And I remember saying, how do you do this thing called work-life balance? Because I found myself entrenched in work all the time. I felt like something in my life was missing. Like I'd go to work, doing very well at work, come home, work again at home, and pay bills. I felt like that's really what my life was. Not to say I didn't get out and have fun, but I still felt like something was missing. It wasn't about a husband. It wasn't about children. I just couldn't put my finger on what I felt like was missing in my life. Love what I did in my career. I just couldn't figure out what was missing. So we had a conversation and he asked me, I said, how do you do it? How do you and your wife do it? And he answered my question by saying to me, what would they say at your funeral? I said, what? What do you mean, what would they say at my funeral? Like, where are you going with this? Like, you're putting me into the ground. And I had not been diagnosed with breast cancer. He said, I want you to think about what would they say at your funeral? And I thought about it and I said, what would they say? That I'm a nice person, but I work a lot, right? What else am I doing? What else am I contributing to society? So in that moment, I said, okay, well, I got Jamaicas and Mardi Gras, Bahamas and, Toronto. I just went everywhere. And so then I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And what I realized was that in the beginning in 2014, where I feel like I was existing, I went from existing to living, but I didn't have purpose. And that's when I discovered the purpose through my breast cancer journey.
Were you thinking about purpose at all?
I hadn't thought about, I take that back. And I used to say, God, a lot of people have had bad things to happen to them, and as they get older, they have some of them have better outcomes. And I used to say, well, what is it? What is it about me? Because I was all like that good girl, right? I didn't have anything, that was like a purpose-driven life, basically. What was it that would drive me to purpose? I have that experience. I was involved in my church and all of these things, but I would question, like, okay, God, what assignment do you have for me? You talk about we're here to do your will, and I'm doing your will, and I'm being good, and being considerate about some things, but what is it that's for me? Like, how do I connect with other people who are less fortunate than me? If I didn't have those same experiences. Yes, I did mentor, but there were times where I didn't know how to connect with them. And I believe that, you got to be careful what you ask for. So when you start, praying about your purpose and it wasn't purpose. I wasn't using the word purpose, but it was kind of like just questioning those things, and you say, God, I'm available to you. And, hey, do what you want with my life. You better be specific. Because I wasn't specific. And of course I laugh about that now, but it was in that moment. And it was crazy because right before I was diagnosed, my business partner had started myself out as an LLC. And our goal was to put on an event to raise awareness for different causes. And our first big event, we have partnered with American Cancer Society, and we made the announcement in May. And our event was supposed to happen in November. I was diagnosed in June. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're about to do something for prostate cancer. And now I'm being diagnosed with cancer. Our event is in November. Here it is June. How does this happen and why? But, I now know why.
You know your why. Tiah, can you talk real quickly about the importance of genetic testing?
Yes, genetic testing is very important. My thoughts around genetic testing is, and this is just Tiah, but my thoughts around genetic testing, it's important to know based on your risk, right? So if you've never been diagnosed, you want to know if this is something that's going to cause you is your risk, do you have a higher risk or propensity of being diagnosed with the disease, right? So let's say you do your genetic test and you find out that you do have a genetic mutation that will lead to a higher risk. I personally do not believe that just because you have a genetic mutation, that means you're going to be diagnosed with cancer. I don't believe that. I believe that it will increase your risk and you should do something with that, right? Some women do what Angelina Jolie did. They're pre-vivers, and they go and they have a mastectomy to lower their risk. And the reason why I say lower their risk, because even if you have a mastectomy, you can still be diagnosed with cancer. A lot of people, I've heard say, oh, you'll not get cancer because no, you can still be diagnosed with cancer. So do something with that, whether it be changing your lifestyle to lower your risk, start making assessments around what am I doing that, in addition to having a genetic mutation, that are also risk factors that I can now eliminate to help lower my risk, right? The other part of if you have been diagnosed, it's important for you to get the genetic testing, because that's going to help you, and I'm going to say you and your care provider, because it should be shared decision making, on making a decision on what's the best treatment, because it should be shared decision making on making a decision on what's the best treatment route that you should go. So that's my belief and my take on why genetic testing is important. And you should get it done. If you had a recurrence, a breast cancer recurrence, and it's been a couple of years, get another test, because their constant science is moving so fast and technology is moving so fast that they're always finding something new. The other part of genetic testing is, if you do find out these things, then, maybe someone else in your family could also have a genetic mutation that you can start now going back and educating your family about this genetic mutation. Or, like I said, if you've never been diagnosed, hey, I was told that I have a genetic mutation. Let me communicate this information to my family so they could potentially get tested. Or we can start having conversation around, what does this mean for our family? So these are the reasons, like I said, my opinion, why I believe that, whether you're a survivor or not, you should get genetic testing.
Okay, you got 1 minute to tell me about clinical trials.
Say it again?
Clinical trials.
Clinical trials. All right. So clinical trials. I'm actually going to be speaking about clinical trials and endpoints for ASCO. We don't participate in clinical trials. It's about 4% of Blacks participate in clinical trials. The problem with that is, remember what I said in the very beginning? We lead in practically everything: heart disease, cancer, and a whole lot of other things. If we're leading in these disease states and we're not participating in clinical trials, and we have a different genetic makeup, then they're creating drugs that could potentially not even work. They're creating drugs that, could cause us, our bodies, harm. And not saying that all of them, but if we don't participate in those clinical trials, then we run the risk of not having drugs that's created for us. There was a drug that came out recently by a company that did not have anyone. It was for COVID, for the coronavirus, that did not have any Blacks on their clinical trial. No Blacks in their clinical trials. And it was a drug specifically for coronavirus. Who's the one that's being diagnosed with coronavirus? Who's more likely? It's Blacks. The numbers are higher in the African American community. So if we don't participate in clinical trials, and I understand why, there's so many reasons why we don't participate in clinical trials. Not only is it just history and mistrust, but it's also access. And it's also some of the clinical trials don't even we get disqualified because of the comorbidities. In their inclusion criteria, we don't meet their criteria because we have other health ailments. But if there are opportunities, healthcare has got to find a way to bring more clinical trials into the Black community. And we've got to start having conversations about this. If they're looking to, create drugs for us, and we want to be healed, I always say, how can we say we've created a successful drug if there's no representation of Blacks or minimal representation of Blacks on their clinical trials? Can you really say that drug is successful? You really can't, because we don't know if that drug is going to work. So we've got to start having conversations more and more about clinical trials so that we can do things, so that we can not only save our own lives, but also save future generations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiah. I appreciate this information, and I know the listeners will be blessed. Can you tell them how to stay in contact or follow you?
Absolutely. You can follow me personally. I'm on Instagram at My Breast Years Ahead. That's the name of our sisterhood, My Breast Years Ahead. You can also find our nonprofit on Instagram at My Style Matters. Our email is info@mystylematters.org. So if you're interested in the Breast Health Matters program or any of our upcoming programs, how to read nutrition labels, healthier lifestyle matters, we have a bunch of them that we're going to be rolling out this year. If you are interested, please contact us. Some of our programs are free of charge. Some we do, they do cost because, again, that money goes back into helping our community. We do give financial resources to those that have a need. We do give care packages. Everything in those care packages are non-toxic. We do hold our ladies' hand. So again, if you do have a need, if you want to support us, we're small, grassroots, boots on the ground, Black-owned, Black-founded, our board is Black, nonprofit organization. Support us. We need all the help we can get. Things have been impacted as a result of the coronavirus. So we're not getting in the funds like we used to. But again, COVID doesn't stop cancer. So why should we stop doing what we're doing to help people? So contact us. We'll be glad to help, and we love your support.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiah, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining Warriors Talk. Meet me next week at 6 p.m. right here on Intellectual Radio, where we are changing lives one warrior at a time.
Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell. To find out more about Warriors Talk, follow at Warriors Talk, the number 1, on all social media outlets, and Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell on YouTube. Please join us next week and every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on IntellectualRadio.com for Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell, where we encourage, educate, and empower you into action.